Hello everyone, my name is John Bussard. I'm an HPE Business Transformation Center engineer for Ingram Micro. Help support servers, blade systems, storage, as well as networking technology solutions from HPE. In my videos, what I like to do is show you a slide from a popular PowerPoint and then demonstrate to you what that means within a management interface. Today, we're going to continue on our discussion with HPE's Simplivity Hyper-Converged platform. Actually, what we're going to do is we're going to expand our Simplivity cluster by adding an additional hyper-converged node within the environment. And we're going to do that via Deployment Manager. So this represents a significant value add to a hyper-converged environment because it's a simpler and faster process for being able to create a new cluster or expand a new cluster. This is compared to a traditional IT environment where you have to purchase the server, configure that server, install the virtualization software on top, configure the network, and then go ahead and carve out and add storage into that environment. So that's a significant investment in time. As you'll see as we go through this deployment process, it'll take us less than an hour to do that. Not that our video is going to be that long. I'm going to kind of cut out some of the empty space in the environment and just take a look in the corner to actually see the time. But certainly we'll deploy a new node with this environment in a quick process. So it's a significant value add. It allows us to be able to simply and quickly expand our environment. So with all that being said, let's deploy a new node within our Simplivity cluster. Okay, so here's our VMware environment. All right, this is our Simplivity environment. Over here, I've got 2 ESX nodes. Down here, I have 1 ESX node. All right, so we're going to expand this cluster down here. Now let's take a look at a little bit of the number scheme. So I've got ESX3 over here, and if you know the IP address over here, you'll see that I got 192.168.80.213. So this last digit is going to change based on what the ESX numbering is. So if I look at ESX2, you see that's 212, and then this guy's going to be 211. So that's kind of the IP addressing scheme that we're going to follow as we go through this. Over here, I have an ILO connection into our new Simplivity Hyper-Converged node. You can see it's sitting here, waiting to be discovered. Now I have an ILO connection into this. This is like having a keyboard, monitor, and mouse plugged directly into the system. I'll just see this remotely in case you don't know what ILO is. Now I can discover this through these IP addresses through my Deployment Manager software. You'll see we're going to automatically discover this, but we receive these IP addresses through a DHCP server in the environment. I'm going to minimize that down. Now the server that we're going to use for deployment is going to be this guy that I've remoted into. Now I could have ran this locally. I could have ran Deployment Manager locally, but it'll discover the new hyperconverged nodes if it's on the same subnet. Plus I thought I could do the windowing a little bit better. Now after I deployed ESX3, right, it allows you to export that configuration in an XML file. And I have that XML file here. What you can actually do is edit it, go through and find those IP addresses and change that. So obviously the new one I'm going to have is going to end in a 4. It's going to be 4th ESX server here. Right, so I changed those, made those changes, and I saved that to here. And I only did that to make this process go a little bit quicker. So let's start up Deployment Manager. Let's log into the vCenter server. That'll be this vCenter server here. Of course, we're going to put in a password. I'm going to log in. In a second, we're going to get a certificate warning, but we're going to accept that because we know this system. Next, we're going to select the data center. So this is the data center we're working with. Expand that out, and we're actually going to select this cluster here. So again, we're going to expand that cluster. Then I'm going to click Next. Now I could go through and manually add the settings, but again, I'm going to import that XML file to make this go a little bit faster. So here's a new XML file I created. Open that up, and I'm going to click Next again. And now I'm going to scan for the host. And again, we're going to scan for this Simplivity Hyper-Converged node. Now, if I wasn't on the same subnet, I would just add the IP addresses up here and then add the host manually. But in a little bit, you'll see that we'll detect this host. There it is. Again, you see those two IP addresses are the same as what we see over here. And I just need to select one of them and click Next. Now you need to pick the management NIC, so this is how you cabled it, and I happen to know I used this NIC here for my management, so it's 1 gig connection, and the storage will need to be on a 10 gig connection, and I'm using this guy right now. I'm going to click Next. Next you'll need to put in the passwords. Obviously those don't get put in the XML file. Click Next again. Now let's talk about the IP addressing. So when we see host information, for example, host gateway, we're talking about the ESX node itself. When you see virtual controller mentioned, that'll be this VM here. So this virtual machine, there'll be one for every ESX host there is. You've got 2 over here, 1 for each of these. Right. This is a part of the software-defined storage. This will take local storage and add it to the software-defined storage within the Simplivity environment. So virtual controller equals these VMs. The host actually equals the ESX host. Right. So there's port group names. Now, I could have changed these when I created the cluster, but I just left them at their default. We can see those real quick. So if I click here, select vSwitch 0, see those 2 port groups sitting here. Right, and now we'll go to the IP addresses. So the host IP address, so this is our management IP address. Back inside VMware, we can see that here. So it's attached to a VM kernel. And then the virtual controller IP address here. Right, and that'll be attached down here. Right, as well as if we go look at this machine and view all the IP addresses, we'll see that guy down here. Right, again, this is 3 instead of 4, because this is off the 3rd host. All right, so let's click Next. All right, now we're going to configure the storage network settings. Now we're working with vSwitch 1, and we have these new port groups. So we have storage PG and storage port group. So again, grab this ESX host here, grab vSwitch 1. We can see those 2 port groups here. We can see the 1 VM kernel port there. So you go into IP addressing, see that set here, and then the virtual controller IP address. So if I go back over to this virtual controller, we'll see that up here. All right, we'll click Next one more time. Now we're talking about the configuration of the federation network, and this is how we get the 2 clusters to be aware of each other or be able to communicate or even replicate between each other. So again, we got a federation port group that exists. So if I go to the ESX host, go to the vSwitch, you'll see the federation port group. And again, if I expand this out, you'll see the virtual machine connection. If I go down to the virtual controller, expand this out, you'll see the IP address for that as well. So if I go here, we look under IP addresses, we'll see that guy up here. All right, so that's kind of how the layout of the IP addresses that you'll need for this. I'm going to click Next again. Next, you'll put in the DNS names as well as your DNS servers. And then if you've created an entry inside your DNS server, you can put the check mark in the box and it will populate itself. So you'll see an ESX4.HPE because I've already created that in our environment. So I'm going to click Next again. Time obviously is very important. So we got to set up some NTP servers. Click Next one more time, and these are our final settings. Click Next again. Okay, now we're going to go through a test, make sure all the settings that we've inputted will work in our environment. So I'm going to click Start Test. You'll see it starts to run through these individual tests, and we can look all the way down, see all the different tests that it's going to go through. And once it's done, it'll allow us to be able to click Next. Right? So again, what will happen is this will go all the way through, and when it's done, it'll collapse this all the way up to the deployment test, and we won't see any of that below. We could also go back and look at our connection, and if you notice, it says under status, it's been discovered. Now we could reset this if you wanted to. If for some reason we made it through these settings and the deployment didn't go well, it's a pretty easy process to factory reset the system. There is an image file that you can get as a part of the firmware bundle. This is right here. You could burn it to a USB drive if you wanted to, or you could attach it through IO, and that happens to be the way I do it. It's a little bit faster to reset a system through a USB connection than through IO, but it allows me to be able to do that remotely. And it'll come up and ask you if you want to do a factory reset, and then you go through it. It's not a very difficult process at all. So we have to sit here and wait for this to go through before we can click Next. All right, so we see that this is collapsed down, so it tells me that our deployment is ready to roll. We could rerun the test if we wanted to. There wouldn't be any good reasons, but we certainly have passed the test. So I'm going to click Next. This is where I exported that XML file. I'm just going to start the deployment. All right, and we can see the deployment happening here. Now, if I started a new deployment, I could go through another process of getting another node out there, and we could monitor the processes up here. Okay. So first it's going to create the hypervisor boot disk. And what I'm going to try to do is kind of window these out so you can see not only the ILO connection, the deployment manager, as well as the ESX environment, the VMware environment, so we can see different things happening. Now we're actually configuring the hypervisor. Again, this will take a little time. Like I said, the process takes less than an hour, but look down here if you want to get an actual representation of time. I'm going to clear out some dead space as we kind of go through this, just to make this video kind of roll along a little bit quicker. Now it's actually copying the virtual controller to the data store. So I'm bringing over the software that'll create this VM here. Now we're going to go through the process of rebooting the hypervisor itself, so rebooting the VMware. So let's shut down, and we'll see the BIOS screen boot up on this ILO connection. Start seeing the VMware software start to boot. All right, so we can see the ESX server has booted. And this is the display you'll see on your Simplivity systems. It'll take a little while for it to be able to detect the reboot. So be patient, and she will show up. Now we can see it's registering itself to the vSphere environment, so ESX4. See that up here as well. It's configuring the management network, things of that nature. You can see a lot of action happening down here as well. It's also registering the other OmniStack card down here. At this point, we don't necessarily need our ILO connection. This isn't necessarily going to change, so I'm going to close that out. Actually, I'll just minimize it. You can see a variety of things happening, creating port groups. Right. Now, this process would be the same
if I was expanding a VMware cluster or creating a new Simplivity VMware cluster. I would just have had to manually enter these settings as I was kind of going through this. See, a variety of things are happening. Now we're going to get some error messages. I wouldn't worry too much about them. They will disappear over time. Right now we're going to see a power on of the OmniStack accelerator card. All right, so that's done. You can actually select that and open up a console. And we can watch this boot up if we felt like it. Yeah, it should boot up. So we're waiting for the virtual controller to boot. As a matter of fact, I'd be willing to bet that this error message is actually gone. We could probably, this warning message is gone, we probably could refresh. And we can see that that's disappeared. So we're waiting for the controller to boot up. We'll continue on with some more configuration. See a few other things happening here. Configuring the network, generating certificates, things of that nature. Starting to register Simplivity extensions or the plugins. You can see a reconfiguration of the virtual machine, again of the OmniStack virtual controller. And we can see the virtual controller is shutting down and it will reboot. You can see a reconfigure of the virtual controller. It's unregistering it or re-register it again. See some other properties are being set. And a variety of reconfigurations and now a power on of the virtual controller again. Now again, we could go back in and actually watch this controller boot by selecting it and opening up a console. And actually you can log into this console and actually interact with the software-defined storage once it joins. You can see down here that the host is joining to the federation. You can see that up here as well. You see a variety of things happening down here, especially adding to the NAS data store. And it's completed. Now we do have an alert over here. This will disappear. Matter of fact, you might see an alert on both of these controllers in a little bit. But again, once things settle down, it'll go to a normal state and everything will be green. Look, I've had other deployments going on. I would see that done, but we could see that this is successful. Click over here and I could set close. Sure, we want to exit. We're done with this deployment. We can actually close out of this session. Again, you can see both those error marks popping up. Those will disappear in a little bit. Now, if we take a look at our ESX4 system, click vSwitch 0, and we'll see the addressing, the virtual machines and how they're connected. We also look at vSwitch 2. And down there we can see the port groups have been added, as well as the IP addresses. And again, this virtual machine. So this looks like the other ones that are inside the environment, right? Just with a slightly different numbering scheme. So that's all it took actually to deploy an extra Simplivity node within our Hyper-Converged environment. Obviously, I dug in a little bit different, but it's to show you all the details and the IP addresses and where they're set up. But once you kind of have your settings, you just need to plug those in, and you can pretty much walk away, and this guy will deploy by itself. And of course, it didn't take all that long in our environment. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and please stay tuned for more videos.